Hello, everyone. We're back with the last parts of Season 5, and tomorrow will be Season 6. But today, we're back to kind of our old way of doing it, where we're discussing it. And we hope you enjoy as we discuss, first, what I call the Lawless Arc, with Maul coming back and taking over Mandalore, and where that leads. And then we'll follow that up with what I call the Wrong Jedi Arc, with Ahsoka, and what I think is the best Star Wars in the Clone Wars. So, stay tuned as we begin the Lawless Arc. Let us know if you like this discussion format. If you do, like and subscribe and leave a comment. And we hope to hear from you soon. And with that, Santa and I will take it away.
Talzin said, go do your thing. So here we have Talzin reviving. At the same time, Maul and Savage, right? So This is a new start for all of them. That's
Absolutely.
a good point.
So we've culminated one arc, and we're starting a new arc in this whole with episode 1 revival, and then it'll pick back up in was it episode 14? I can't remember the number.
Yes.
Yeah, episode 14. So we'll get to there. So the quick summary of that is that if we know that Maul was found on the junklands of Lotho Minor, then Maul is taken by Savage, some other Talzin, who restores his sanity and repairs his legs. And then following that, we go right into where we start off with Revival. And where do we pick up? We're picking up with basically they're doing Grand Theft Space Station.
Good point. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They're going by and looting and just taking what they need to be able to build up for the bigger plan. Right. Their goal is not to just keep doing this, just to be going and
bank robbers, prototype.
Yeah, doing small cash grabs.
Right.
Their goal is to lead an empire.
Right. Well, I mean, that's Savage is. It seems perfectly fine though to do the small petty crooks. It's Maul that has the grand master plan.
That's true. And they were doing, fairly successfly. And had they not, so where this kind of goes is, they up the ante, right?
Right.
And they make the Jedi take attention to them.
That's right. So, but this starts off in this whole portion where Maul is basically getting ready to assert his plan, because it's clear that Savage has no plan, and so it's in this moment that Maul declares that he is the master of Savage, and of course Savage doesn't really take kindly to that at first,
right?
And then but he likes his life more than he likes being an equal. So eventually he bows and accepts that Maul's his master. And I think why I had said before in conversation, what I thought was really interesting is, normally you hear, says, I'm not going to teach you as your master, but as your brother, showing love. But in this case, he goes, I'm not going to teach you as your brother, I'm going to teach you as your master. Saying that it's not love, this is a power imbalance. And I just thought that was really interesting. Like right off the bat, it's, hey, I am more powerful than you. You will, do what I say, and not because I love you, but because you will do what I say.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We'll see it through this arc how much Maul picked up from Palpatine, right? Like with the master and apprentice model. Here we see Maul exert his power over Savage, but that same concept continues on as Maul continues to build his empire.
Right, and so their very first step in Revival is to begin to build that empire of the underworld, and they start off with pirates, and so they go to Florin, where they begin the process of subjugating Hondo's pirate kingdom.
Yeah, and I think the goal here is to establish your base, right? They see Florin as an easy or a first step. This is their platform, and if they can establish Florin as a home base, just like Hondo has done, then they can step off from there, and that's where they start.
But Obi-Wan and Adi Gallia follow the clues from the space station because, of course, lightsabers catch their attention, and they follow that because of a misspoken word that a droid picked up, and they follow them to Florum.
Yep.
And so that's where we are taken, and so they come up at the point where basically Maul and Savage have subdued the 3 pirate ships and all their crew, and he goes down to or he's planning to go down to subdue Hondo. And
if Obi-Wan doesn't arrive, Maul is likely successful on Florum, right? He has the upper hand. He's got enough of Hondo's men, plus he and Savage, to easily overtake Hondo. And had not the Jedi arrived to confront Maul and Savage, then and split up his attack force, so to speak, then he successfully takes Florum.
Right. I mean, Hondo is clearly smarter and craftier than his lieutenants, which is why he's in charge. You know, I mean, and he's. I mean, it's one of the things I find funny about the Weekways is pirates is how much they reward being duplicitous.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and he's like he like completely accepts that they were offered more money under Maul. So it's like, I get it. It's okay. Come on over to my side and I won't kill you.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Yeah,
I'm so proud of you for being greedy.
I've taught you well. You've learned. Yeah.
It is kind. It's humorous actually how they reward that behavior. It's comical the way he does it. And but so yeah, when we get down there and that leads to with Obi-Wan and Adi Gallia offering their services to Hondo. Hondo says, "Hey, we'll have the fight here," and then Maul and his forces land. They have they fire them up and then they land and they start their assault, and then of course Obi-Wan and Adi Gallia head straight toward Maul and Savage, take them on. So it's clear that they're willing to get involved in a fight with a neutral party as long as the other force has lightsabers, I guess you could say, and so, I mean, because even though they're saying he's Sith, I'm not sure Maul still considers himself Sith per se at this point. I don't know.
Well,
he kind of does and he kind of doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Maul keeps saying that he's the true Sith.
Right.
But,
yeah. I mean, so yeah. Well, I think for the sake of argument, Maul considers himself Sith at this point, and so, Obi-Wan is, of course, they feel obligated to do this. This is one of the things that comes up later on in the question I thought was really interesting, and in the course of the answers. But yeah, so I mean, and Adi Gallia is killed. Savage kills Adi Gallia, and then they're both double teaming Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan basically they're forced him and Hondo, can't handle both of these forces. I mean, together, Maul and Savage are just too much for Obi-Wan and Hondo. I mean, Hondo would have been just completely decimated with those two guys.
The thing that worked is that before they kill Adi Gallia, she and Obi-Wan are enough a distraction for Savage and Maul that Hondo is able to reclaim his pirates. You sort of alluded to it earlier. So rather than Maul having this two-pronged attack, he's now just him and Savage. He's lost his pirate group. They're back to Hondo.
Well, I don't think that happened until they got inside the caverns. Yeah. So because once they got split, and Adi Gallia is killed at that point. So at this point, you have Adi Gallia is dead. It's going against Hondo and Obi-Wan. And then they lead them, and he says, "Hey, I'll split them off, so you just have to deal with the pirates." Right. And then they have that heavy gun. And so then they collapse the cavern, splitting off, the leaders of the pirate group, and that's when they join Hondo, and
That's
that's
true.
and Hondo, praises them for being so duplicitous. That was funny, but
Right. That's the turning point, really.
right,
Because had they continued that assault, Obi-Wan was outgunned. Obi-Wan is able to wound Savage significantly enough that Savage thinks he's going to die.
right.
And Maul's like, "Oh, you just lost an arm. Right? You'll be fine."
I was cut in
And
half. Come on.
I was cut in half, dude. Right? You'll be fine. You just lost an arm. It's okay. But they do end up having to retreat because Hondo's forces are now joined together with Obi-Wan, and they push him back. So at that point, Maul realizes, okay, this Florum is lost.
Right. So what the moral of the lesson of that story is: don't corner a Jedi, because then they start acting like rabid dogs or cats.
Well, that's true. Well, and more, you need to have forces that believe in your cause.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
by using the pirates, you didn't have a joint cause, right? They were in it for the moment, and as soon as the moment was lost, you lost them.
Right. That's right. It's all about greed, and if I'm with you with as long as everything's going in my favor and I can achieve what I want, which is to be wealthy and rich. But as soon as it looks like I might die, that's not such a good plan anymore.
That's right. And what we see in the next, what's coming up is that you have people with a cause, and those people with a cause of their own then are a group that you can trust to carry out the overall plan because they have a bigger purpose in mind.
Right. As long as it aligns with their cause.
That's right.
I mean, it's really what it comes down to is that you can create an allegiance or a group as long as what's being done aligns with the cause of people within that group.
That's right. That's right. And when the pirates that Maul had won over lost that incentive, then it was gone. Right. And so Maul, when he regroups and they move forward again, it's quite fortuitous, and we'll get to this, but it's quite fortuitous that he meets with other people that have something that they can align their missions together. But in this case, that's what was the flaw in the plan, and it ultimately is what caused it to break down and why he lost Florum.
Right. I mean, I think the recurring theme that I keep seeing is that the crooks always get crooked. And they're always willing to switch sides when it's to their advantage.
Yeah.
And so this leads us right into episode 14, which is Imminence. And so near death, the brothers are found by Pre Vizsla and Death Watch, and discovering that they have lightsabers, and then they also discover that they're enemies of Obi-Wan, which if in the previous episode you find out that Pre Vizsla really hates Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And so finding out that, he takes them back to the base on Zanbar, and so the Mandalorians, Death Watch, nurse Maul and Savage back to health, and so because Vizsla has a plan to use them to get what he wants.
Well, Vizsla says the enemy of the Jedi is a friend of mine.
Yep.
So that's the quote that I pulled out of that whole piece there. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right.
But he says specifically, the enemy of the Jedi is a friend of mine, right. And that's how he starts the relationship with Maul.
Absolutely, but it also shows you how quickly that enemy of my enemy is my friend can break down to where they ain't your friend anymore.
Well, that's where you talk about the quote you just said, right? Like they turn on each other.
That's right. Crook gets crooked.
Yeah.
So what? And we know that what Vizsla wants is a Mandalore that's free of the pacifist ideology that is espoused by Satine Kryze, the Duchess of Mandalore.
Yeah. And so I think that's where I was just mentioning when Maul lost Florum, he needed another base, and so Pre Vizsla's got this mission to get back Mandalore. And Maul sees this as the opportunity. Aha. Okay, Florum failed, but Mandalore could work. And these guys have a mission, right? They have a bigger purpose. They have something that's larger than themselves.
Yep.
In mind here.
They're willing to die for it.
Exactly. And so he's able to leverage that. Like, okay, you guys want this. I need a base of operation. That's going to work for me. And I could bring something you don't have. You could bring something I don't have, and we can make this work.
That's right.
And that's then he realizes, well, what we need in order for this to work are more forces. We don't have enough.
Yeah, the problem that Maul quickly surmises is that Vizsla doesn't have a plan outside of his death watch for taking Mandalore. So, like, he really thinks that his small group can eventually bring Mandalore to its knees, but it's been failing, which, is the kind of the definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Right? So that's been his plan, but people have been following him, Bo-Katan being one of them, right?
Yep.
And so he says, hey, listen, I can get you the things that you need in order to eventually have Mandalore be yours.
That's right.
And that is, so they vote for Maul. But what we find right in the very beginning is that both sides are already planning on double-crossing the other. I mean, that's almost immediately shown.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Maul's like, I'm the brains of this operation. I'm going to make it work for you. And Pre-Vizsla has to tell his folks, like, okay, hold on. We'll play this a little bit of a longer game. Let's let Maul do his thing for now. And when the time is right, when we're on Mandalore and we have the upper hand, we'll double cross him.
Right. And Maul states specifically that he plans to Savage that they'll double cross Pre when the time comes.
Yeah, because I think Savage sees the same risk. He's like, hey, how are you to know that these people are going to be loyal?
Right.
Well, they're not going to be loyal. Mm-hmm. We'll double cross them when we get there.
Right.
So that's, they have that in mind. So Maul, just to help with those forces, decides to attack the Black Sun. He wants to get Black Sun under his control.
Right.
And then also the Hutts.
Right, and the Pikes also, but the Pikes freely come.
Yeah, those become critical to Maul's plan. He's able to overpower Black Sun and then use those forces to go into the Hutts.
Right.
Ultimately, he overpowers them, and then together with those joint groups, right? You've got the Death Watch, Black Sun, Hutts, and what's the other group there? The
Pikes. So you have Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, and then the Hutt Space.
Now they have the pieces they need to go to Mandalore.
That's right. Well, I mean, if you consider that Hutt Space is actually they actually control a large area of the galaxy. I mean, if you remember, we can go all the way back where the reason why they were trying to save Jabba's son all the way back in the movie is because the Republic wanted free passage through Hutt Space.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that goes all the way back. So, by bringing the Hutts, you don't just gain the, now Hutta and their criminal organization. You actually gain all the worlds that are a part of that and the, and that space inside the galaxy that they control.
Yeah, the passageways, which are critical to getting,
And so, and reason why Mandalore is so advantageous that comes very clear to Maul is that they're the head of the 2,000 neutral systems.
Right.
And so there's 2,000 worlds that are under the sway of Mandalore.
Yeah, this is a rapid path, right? Like we could get to the front of the line. Where he was going with Florum, he was going to establish a base and then start picking off one by one to add to his the sphere of influence. If he can make this thing with Mandalore work, then you've got 2,000 systems. And if this plays off correctly, you can lead those 2,000 systems off the bat.
Right.
Yeah.
I was actually shocked in this how good the bounty hunters were against Maul and Savage. That actually was kind of shocking to me.
Well, I brought this up before. The bounty hunters uh, did pretty well against Jedi.
Yeah.
So, yeah, bounty hunters, the Jedi, I guess the Jedi aren't what a lot of people think they are, right?
Yeah.
So you go
or
back
the
to
bounty
Anakin,
hunters are more than what we think they are.
Yeah, you go back to Anakin when he was a little kid, right? Saying, oh, Jedi can't be killed. Well, they're not all that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can see a child having that perception.
Sure.
I mean, I was just actually kind of surprised that the strength of I'm not surprised that bounty hunters are better than the average person. That doesn't surprise me. That they could kill a politician or even a hardened criminal per se. But the idea that they're able to regularly, that all of them are able to regularly go toe to toe against Jedi or Maul, and I mean, to me, I get it, you're raising the tension, but it to me it seems like you're overdoing it. I mean,
yeah.
So like if there were four bounty hunters going up against Maul and 4 bounty hunters that are all really good going up against Savage, okay, I can see that. That's a 4-on-1 advantage. But as they start being killed, then the advantage goes, and now there's no more toe-to-toe fighting because it's done.
Well, let's go back to Cad Bane. Right, Cad Bane holds his own with a lightsaber against Obi-Wan and I can't remember that other Jedi's name. Was kind of off the reservation kind of guy.
Quinlan Voss?
Yeah, Quinlan Voss. Right. So, I mean, he does very well against 2 Jedi Masters, and is able to keep them on their heels for a good bit of that battle. That's 1 2.
Right. I mean, I can't. So yeah, obviously we're talking about some things that are, and I get why they do it in story. It's to keep that tension up. But I mean, for somebody who can has precognition enough to basically determine when somebody's going to fire and where they're going to fire, I don't see how. So I mean, if you're able to do that against somebody who is shooting, all right, there's plenty of time in that space. There should be no way that a person who is swinging a lightsaber or sword or in hand-to-hand combat with you can outdo you. I mean, it should be chunk chunk, and they're in half.
Right. Right.
I mean,
right.
It really should be that quick. I mean, it's like either you have precognition or you don't. So it's just one of those things that I get why they do it. It's to keep the tension high, but in the scheme of this, it doesn't make sense, and that's why I like it much better when you have the Jedi versus Jedi or Sith versus Jedi and those kind of things, because as soon as it takes away the mystique of them, and it really, in my opinion, overpowers the Jedi, and so
it both overpowers and underpowers them depending on the situation.
Oh, that's what I meant. It overpowers it underpowers the Jedi is what I meant.
Yeah,
takes away the mystique and underpowers the Jedi. I
depends on the situation, right? Sometimes they're overpowered, sometimes underpowered, based on what the story,
the needs of the story, which is what we talked about with continuity. Whenever you have that continuity disruption, people go, "What?
How does Cad Bane stand against 2 Jedi Masters?"
That's right.
I mean, doesn't make any sense.
I get it. Like if one was held down by something electrical on his feet or something like that, and he can't move, and so. And he can't cut it away or something. I don't know. But it just takes some creativity in writing, and I think sometimes they get a little lazy.
Yep.
And, but that does not exist here, except for the sake of those Jedi or those bounty hunters are a little more powerful than they probably should be against Maul and Savage. That's about it. But eventually, they after they get out of there, they track Jabba down to his palace. And he's like, when he goes on Tatooine, he was like, at his palace? Like, I captured you, and the information you give me is, he's back at his house. It's like, duh, And so that leads to the subdual of Jabba at his palace, and Gorga too. I think it was Gorga and Jabba, and then they agree to surrender Hutt space to Maul, and they join his Shadow Collective. And so that's how that episode ends. So now Maul has all the pieces together, in order to take Mandalore. And now the plan, of course, is not what Pre Vizsla thinks it is. He thinks that they're putting an army together so they can conquer Mandalore. Turns out that's not Maul's plan at all.
No, Maul wants to set up the Death Watch to be the saviors. It positions Pre Vizsla to be then the hero and to step in as conqueror, savior of Mandalore,
Right.
Conqueror of the invaders,
Right.
the savior of Mandalore, to gain the political power that he needs to lead that planet and ultimately the 2,000 systems that are aligned.
That's right.
Maul doesn't want to have a hostile takeover so much where they just destroy the government of Mandalore and replace it with Death Watch, but rather, welcome as the conquering heroes, so that they have the support of the people. There's a brilliant plan from that perspective.
Right. And that way they don't also lose the neutral systems.
Right.
Because if the government falls from a outside hostile takeover, then they're obviously not aligned with the neutral systems anymore. But if you have a internal, hero arise that conquers the, potential invading parties, then they're still Mandalorian, they're still, in agreement, and they maintain that neutral control.
That's right. And ultimately, it works out that in a civil dispute of this type, it keeps the Jedi Council from getting involved as well.
Right. And which is also part of his plan.
Yeah.
And so we see that his plan's starting to come together. Vizsla, he's asked Vizsla for the proper locations and the pressure points to make life miserable on Mandalore if those places are controlled by criminal organizations, and so of course Vizsla provides those. We also learn that again they were reinforced on the idea that they're preparing their double cross of Maul, and then but in that whole point in time he provides them, and sure enough Maul executes his plan with his Shadow Collective, and it cripples and angers the people of Mandalore. And so Satine's government is brought to its knees by this execution of the plan.
Yeah. And it sets up Death Watch perfectly. You get Pre Vizsla come in with the Darksaber, which is a symbol that has significance with the Mandalore people. The Death Watch may have had a negative perception, but here they come in as saviors. Just at the point where everything's brought to its knees, the Death Watch comes in, Pre Vizsla with the Darksaber, and saves the day. Right.
Yep.
So it's sort of the guy riding in on the white horse to save the day. Essentially, that's the impression that they give, and the whole thing was orchestrated and choreographed. Worked out well.
And I guess secretly Satine is in prison because I didn't see any fanfare with that. But then she's placed in prison, lo and behold, right next to former Prime Minister Almec, who was arrested in a previous arc for corruption. So now we're seeing things come full circle. We're seeing previous arcs coming into play, which is, of course, we just talked about that previous arcs coming into play with Maul, but now we're seeing the previous Mandalorian arcs come into play here. So Almec is right there, and so we get some interchange between them and how he was saying, hey, listen, what your plan was has led to this. My plan, if you'd just stayed with where I was doing, we would have kept these organizations placated, and they would still be in control of Mandalore. And so congratulations, this is what you brought upon the people. It's it's like he's basically saying you got to accept some corruption. There's no perfect system. It's kind of the way I perceived what he was saying to her.
And it's more than that. It's that we can't do everything through pacifist, talking our way to reason.
Right. Well, that's Pre Vizsla's position, right? But I thought Almec was saying, because Almec was utilizing the corruption of system. He was using these criminal organizations as well. He was allowing some corruption to occur in order to maintain the supply lines because they didn't have any supplies, if we remember back in the day.
Yeah.
And so he's saying, listen, we wouldn't be in this situation because those organizations would have been, already working with us, and so we would have had some leverage with them. Right. But now, because you can't have any corruption, you won't accept any type of reward system except that it feels good to do the right thing. And kind of system, now these guys who have the power have utilized it against us, and look where you are. You're sitting right next to me. Yeah. And so you gave Death Watch the in to take over Mandalore. And so that to me, that's how I perceived what Almec was saying to her. It wasn't overt like that, but that's how I perceived it. Maybe I'm a little off.
Well, even if that's the case, there's a flaw in that plan, because what you would have done is had them with stronger roots in Mandalore to be able to execute even more effectively.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's, there's always flaws. I'm just saying that they wouldn't have had their foothold in the way that you think it is. That's what he's saying.
It is a good point. Like, be yourself morally pure or not pure. Look, here we are in the same boat.
That's right.
Right. This moral superiority that you believed would lead to prosperity has you in the same spot.
Right. That's what he's getting at.
Yeah.
And he's also asserting that he was right, but you stopped my plan from doing that. But that's, like I said, I don't think he's overt about this. He's kind of lording his position, saying, "Look at you, look at the high and mighty, look how you've fallen," kind of thing. I mean, that's what he's doing. And then as soon as we get this situation, we find out that Death Watch Pre Vizsla executes their double cross, and of Maul, and so just as Maul starts expressing overtly his interest in the 2000 neutral systems, he's like, and Pre Vizsla says, I don't care about the 2000 neutral systems, I care about Mandalore. And he's like, but you should, and da-da-da-da, boom. And that's when the betrayal happens from the Death Watch side.
Well, and he does. And then Maul his kind of ace in the hole, his card that is in his back pocket, is to challenge Pre Vizsla to the honor duel.
Right, but that didn't happen yet. Not until he talks to Almec.
Well,
because he's right next to Almec.
It's his when that's the way he gets out, because at that point Maul is hostage. He's has no power.
Right. So Maul is arrested and taken down to the prison, right? And he and Savage are talking about, what they're planning. He goes, now what are you going to do, brother? And he goes, well, Vizsla has unwittingly put me right next to the people that I need to be talking to figure out who to take over Mandalore. Yeah. And so he's down there, and that's when he's talking to Satine, and he says, "Oh, I see that right next to you is the former Prime Minister of and she's like, don't talk to him, he's corrupt." He's like, "Oh, well, that's nice. That's good to know." Well, that's the information I needed.
I mean, I think the Maul already had the plan to challenge Pre Vizsla with the intent of defeating him. I think that's how Maul was going to double cross Pre Vizsla all along, so that he would take rightful rule of Mandalore.
Right. I think Maul didn't have a plan on that. I actually kind of disagree with you on that.
That's fine.
And I think Maul was kind of playing it by ear. Like, he already knew he was going to double cross it, but he didn't know exactly. And I think that's why we get kind of caught in this situation. So I think Maul wanted the opportunity. He thought that Vizsla would stay on long enough and would still want enough power that he would care about the 2000 neutral systems, kind of like spreading the Mandalorian Empire back to have the way it had been in the past. And so I think he was dangling that out for Vizsla, thinking that would because what he wanted, he wants those 2000 systems, but Maul doesn't want to be overt about it. He doesn't want to show his hand, and so I think he just thought that Vizsla would be greedy enough, because that's the way he thinks, that he would still have something to put the thumb on Vizsla. And well, Vizsla clearly rejected the idea of the 2000 systems, and so and that led to him betraying him in that moment. So and that's why I asked a couple of questions when I was thinking. I said, Maul had to think that Vizsla at some point, when he had what he wanted, he just didn't ascertain accurately enough exactly what Vizsla wanted, but that he would betray him once he had it.
Well, yeah, I mean, he and Savage talked about it,
right? And so it seemed like he didn't really have a plan for his own betrayal. Like what point in time he was going to betray Vizsla. That's what it seemed like to me. But like his plan did come together once he was placed down in prison. Like he knew he was going to do it. He just didn't have all the pieces together. He hadn't thought ahead, is what it seemed like to me, about how he was going to execute his betrayal.
I thought that he had, and that's fine, because either way, what he had planned on doing, at least from my perspective, is to put somebody in charge, put a Mandalore in charge of Mandalore, right?
Mandalorian in charge of Mandalore,
yeah. And be that Pre-Vizsla or somebody else,
right?
And if Pre-Vizsla, he had anticipated that Pre-Vizsla was going to double cross him. He and Savage talked about it. And if Pre-Vizsla is going to exert himself, I'll just kill him and I'll put somebody else in. I think that was his thought from the get-go.
Right.
Now, maybe the particulars as far as claiming the Darksaber and then taking the Death Watch, I don't know if loyalty is the right word.
Right.
But they have to serve the rightful owner of the Darksaber. But I don't know that he necessarily thought that. He'd just take control of Death Watch and then
I think he just thought like somebody like Bo-Katan would step up in the place of Pre-Vizsla and that person would rule Mandalore and rule the Death Watch. I think that's kind of what he thought.
Yeah, I agree.
And so then he finds out that Almec tells us, well, if you kill Vizsla, then the Death Watch will be, because they're following the old ways, will be honor bound to follow you.
Right.
And I think this actually goes to me to show how much the Mandalorians have lost their way, in the sense that they don't understand their own rights and honors. And so this is why Bo-Katan, after the fight, and we'll go into that. So let's talk about the fight, and then we'll talk about why Bo-Katan responds the way she does. But Almec implants the idea into Maul's head that all he has to do is kill Vizsla, challenge Vizsla. He will be honor bound to answer it, and if you kill him, the Death Watch will follow you, and that leads to his plan. So they initiate their escape. They get all the way up there, and when it looks like they're about to be engaged by all the Death Watch, he goes, "I challenge you to single combat." Which Vizsla, in his hubris, says, "Okay," which all he had to do is say, "No, I've already beaten you."
Right.
Kill him.
Yeah.
And but because it is clear they don't understand things like, the things I don't think they've necessarily brought it all the way over. So Karen Travis, who wrote into the EU, had developed something called the Raisonare, which is the 6 tenets of being Mandalore. That's wearing the armor, speaking the language, serving the clan. And it's all about loyalty. It's about upholding your culture, your ideals, and being loyal to the family. That's the ideals of the leader that can, best embody those 6 tenets and is also and is the strongest and able to proliferate those ideals becomes the leader. And then that leader, if he's able to defeat or convince the other clan leaders to follow him, he becomes the head of Mandalore, and he becomes the Mandalore, the leader of the Mando people. And that's in the EU. Now I think they're borrowing on that idea as they come into the Clone Wars, but I think they've set up this situation where the Mandalorians have forgotten how to be Mandalorian. They know there's a warrior culture. There's those that have rejected it for peace. and you have this effectively a rewrite of history or a loss of ideals, and people are struggling to reach back to what it was that made them great, and they do not know what it was. And so you have this aspect of might makes right, but that really wasn't what it is. And so when the challenge comes in Vizsla's hubris, he says, "I'll do it," and he says, "For Mandalore," and boom, then we have our fight. And so this is a back and forth, and then eventually, of course, if you want to talk about that.
Well, yeah. So yeah, they have the battle. Ultimately, just to shortcut it, Maul gains control of that Darksaber. He kills Pre Vizsla, and then claims the Death Watch, and the bulk of the Death Watch accept that just on the face of it. Say, that's you're the person that defeated the previous owner, so now you are the owner, so now we are loyal to you. Again, the bulk of them, as you mentioned before, Bo-Katan she's not going to go for it. And a few of people that are more of her mindset peel off.
She says specifically, no outsider will rule Mandalore. So she is clear that she understands that there is some code that is followed, and if you don't adhere to that code, you can't be the leader. It doesn't matter that you have the Darksaber, or in the case of the old EU, you had the Mask of Mandalore. It didn't matter that you had it. If you were an outsider, if you don't adhere to the code of being a Mandalorian, you can't lead the Mandalorians.
Right. It's not just this line of secession through the Darksaber and defeating the previous owner. Right. It's more than that.
It's that you are also a believer in the code of what it means to be a Mandalorian, and you're able to wield that.
Because the bulk of the Death Watch did display that loyalty to the Darksaber. I'll just put it that way. Right. Their loyalty was to the Darksaber and whoever wields it.
Right.
Then Maul is put in a place, and this is sort of behind the scenes. So the people of Mandalore don't see this happen. They don't know that Maul is the puppet master at this point. And Maul then places Olmec as prime minister to rule Mandalore. Right? You've got a Mandalorian who was previously at a position of high in the government, now being placed at the head of the government under Maul, but they don't know that he has that allegiance to Maul.
Right.
So Mandalore it still has this outward appear of a civil situation where one group take control of the government over another group, and that it's not being controlled by an outside force or an invasion, which is critical. I mean, that's critical to the whole thing working. To the 2,000 systems that are aligned, to not getting the Jedi Council involved or the Republic, right? They don't want any of that business. And so it's critical that they make this a civil matter on Mandalore. And that's how it plays out.
Yep, that is a good summary of the end of that episode. And so that leads us right into episode 16, the Lawless. I think that I didn't get one down right.
Yep.
And so we begin with this one, so that basically Maul's in the process of exacting his revenge in this episode against those who have thwarted his plans, and the first on that list is Kenobi. And so the whole episode begins with Corky. Which we also saw in a previous episode, and he's now pretty grown up. He looks like he's grown up a couple of years. So, in this episode, but is the nephew of Satine Kryze, the Duchess, and with the help of I can't say her name, Bo-Katan, she escapes, and that's where we also get back the actual quote of she says, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," and when Satine says, to Bo-Katan, "I thought we were enemies," and she said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." So
Good point. Good point. And Satine takes the opportunity to reach out to Obi-Wan to ask for help. So we've had an invasion, right? Something's happened. We need your help. And Obi-Wan, of course, with his relationship to Satine, goes to the Jedi Council and says, "Hey, there's been an invasion. We need to go in and help." But the Jedi Council, I think somewhat rightfully so, they don't have enough information. They think that it's a civil matter. This is a matter of Mandalorian government, Mandalorians, and determining themselves who is over the government, and that Satine doesn't like the outcome of that. That's not our problem. Right? We're not to get involved in those matters.
right, but I mean, they bring up the question of whether this is Maul, and they talk about how the underworld and this being was right for picking, and how this could be him, and yet they say they don't send anybody else to investigate. They just say, "Well, Maul, everyone, this is your matter. If you want to get help, you do it on non-official business."
Yeah,
and I find it very interesting.
Well, I find it interesting too that the Jedi Council picks and chooses based on what the Republic basically tells them to do. Right? They are truly puppets of Palpatine at this point.
No, absolutely.
And it's not as overt as it is in the next series, but I think that's a big play here. Why they decide not to get involved at all.
Right.
Like, they don't even send an exploratory force. They say, "This is a personal matter between you and your girlfriend, right? You have a personal a relation here. You go check that out if you have to do that, but we're out."
Right?
In previous cases, when the Republic's been involved, sure, they'd send like Anakin and Ahsoka, or maybe Obi-Wan, Rex, Anakin, and Ahsoka to go check it out.
Right.
In this case, even though they have the suspicion that Maul might be involved, or that there might be something in the underworld, some external influence, they're like, "Nope, we don't have proof," and they don't even go to investigate. They just
let it be. And it strikes me as odd that they restrict themselves to only being doing anything inside the Republic. And if we go all the way back to when everything was occurring in Attack of the Clones, they specifically said, "Oh, we don't have enough Jedi to handle, to serve both the Separatists and the Republic." And I was thinking, why? It's the same size galaxy. The galaxy hasn't changed. And then if we go all the way to Qui-Gon in Episode 1, so we don't have any jurisdiction here. Why? You're not police forces. You're the Jedi.
Yeah, But they had already become an arm of the Republic, right? They're already at that point an instrument of the Chancellor.
That's right, and that was even before Palpatine took over. It's just that Palpatine is pulling them tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter.
Well, and we know that Palpatine, even back before he was elevated to Chancellor, was already clouding people's judgment. Right? That was already started way back then. He just wasn't in the position of power. He was setting everything up.
Yeah.
And the Jedi had lost their way, and here we see it.
Which made it easy for him to cloud their judgment, because their judgment's already misplaced.
Yeah, and he had been kind of working on that, I think, for probably decades.
Yeah.
And by this point, they are an arm of the Republic, an instrument of the chancellors. And as you just mentioned, Qui-Gon's like, "We don't have any jurisdiction." Well, that's because the chancellor didn't send you, right? Well, what's the chancellor got to do with the Jedi Order or Jedi Council or your role as a Jedi? Like, go back to the Jedi precepts. What's that got to do with anything? That's a valid question. And here, the Jedi Council, because it's not in line with what the Republic or the Chancellor is after, they're like, "Well, we're out." And they sort of turn a blind eye to allow Obi-Wan to go to Mandalore, because they realize he's got this personal connection to Satine. He says, "Well, if this is something you have to pursue, you do it on your own time."
Yep. I mean, that becomes the skinny of the whole thing. But I mean, I thought it was really interesting because I mean, this just brings back those same questions that I've heard many people ask regarding the prequel movies. So I mean, just thought it was really interesting. And,
It is. It's fascinating.
So of course, Obi-Wan does go to Mandalore. He takes Anakin's ship, the Twilight, that they gained all the way back in the movie for the Clone Wars, the movie that led us into season 1. All right, and so again, things coming back, and we talked about this. I had the ships all broken down as they come in. We're like, well, obviously, Obi-Wan broke it down so that he could get on to Mandalore, and that was his excuse for landing because his ship's broken, it's smoking.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's easy. And then he makes that statement. This is the last time I borrow a ship from Anakin. I was like, what? when did the Twilight smoke? I mean, it's never smoked like that before.
Yeah, it was the perfect cover to not have landing orders, right? I don't have landing orders, but I got to land. So, clear the runway kind of idea. But then when he says it's the last time I borrow from Anakin, it's like, well, what? This wasn't intentional. Like this was a result of Anakin's shenanigans.
So Anakin has so much precognition not to fix the Twilight so that you can land because your ship's broken.
Yeah. So it does. While it's a funny line, it does insert a bit of a error in the
logic, right?
Behind why it's damaged and why it's landing. You're not supposed to connect those dots.
Right.
Because it is the perfect cover, right? You don't have landing orders, so you have to land because you're smoking,
Yeah, you're about to crash, so it's emergency landing.
Right, and so they allow it. And then, of course, they've got all the forces there to make sure that this isn't any shenanigans, and he comes off wearing that Mandalorian armor that he had used before as well. So
right, I think again we talked about that. So like one of the coolest things about what Obi-Wan's wearing is he's wearing armor that is the original concept by Ralph McQuarrie that for Boba Fett. So I mean, that was what Mandalorian armor was supposed to look like originally, and it developed into what it is now. But that was through a series of iterations to get us there, and I just think it's really cool them hearkening back and pulling Ralph McQuarrie designs into these cartoons or into these animated series. Forgive me for calling it a cartoon.
Well, talk about these two things back to back like this raises the point where people who are interested in the lore and in the extended universe, the overarching story, to have a piece where you have a throwaway line for humor that creates a hole. Meanwhile, on the other side, you got him wearing armor that has such significance behind, like through the whole creation of Star Wars.
Right.
Is a little baffling because people with such inside knowledge and understanding of the very foundations of Star Wars are obviously involved, or you wouldn't have that armor specifically. Right. And at the same time, you have this other plot hole that they threw in.
That's right. It's because writers aren't drawers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's be specific. I mean, so the thing is, I think these were written by Katie Lucas, which is George Lucas's daughter. So she could pretty much do whatever she wanted to when it came to writing it. So it is what it is, and if she introduces plot holes, as Lucas likes to say, Lucas said to Dave Filoni, continuity is for wimps.
Yeah.
But and we've talked about the context. So he did say that, but the context of that. So we'll go ahead and get into that context of that, and I'll be quick. The context is this: that people don't really care about your continuity as long as your characters are good. And if people are, the thing is that it's really hard to draw all your pieces together. So this is where you're allowed to break rules. So the idea is you suppress continuity during the period of time that you're doing development of your character arcs. So if your characters are good, people will forgive your lack of continuity. That's his point. And so I don't. I honestly don't agree with that, but I mean that's. I see where he's coming from. I think that you have to have continuity, but you know that's a time. That's a discussion, a story for another time.
Yeah, yeah. Obi-Wan lands. He ends up meeting up with Satine, and they make a break for it, but it's ultimately fails. Maul's forces are able to knock down the ship that they're escaping on, and they recapture Satine and Obi-Wan and take them into captivity. And as a result, they have a bit of a kangaroo court kind of thing. Everybody's brought before Maul, who's kind of sitting on the throne, figuratively. And Obi-Wan and Satine are there, and Maul uses the Force choking Satine to get Obi-Wan's compliance or to kind of manipulate him. And through that interchange between Maul and Obi-Wan, Maul, just to show that he has complete power and knowledge of what's going on, he uses the Darksaber to run through Satine and kill her.
Yeah.
With a fatal, it's a fatal
right
stab.
He kills her to torture Obi-Wan, and the attempt to get him to break into to reach into his anger and grief and use the dark side, and he's trying to do it with the torture as well. And in fact, that you know, it's in that moment that Obi-Wan says it's not strength to be able to do these things, to use the dark side. When he goes, I'm strong and you're weak, and he says, no, you're weak. Yeah. It takes strength to resist the dark side.
Yeah, and then Bo-Katan, as a part of that, she then confesses her dying love for Obi-Wan, that she's always loved him.
Right. Satine says, you know, I've always loved you. And she's also begging him not to give in to the dark side. And, you know, and of course he doesn't, because he honors who she is. And and it helps him stay strong.
Yeah, I get fascinated by the discussion, and we won't go into it here, but just kind of plant the seed here that the Jedi Order that had prevented Jedi from marrying, from entering into romantic relationships, that kind of thing, because of the risk associated with possessing and not being able to let loose of things and all of that. That Satine and Obi-Wan denied this love they have for each other in carrying that out through marriage, where obviously both of them had a lifelong love for one another that went through their death.
Right.
They never went past that. And here we see a Satine confess it in her death. And it raises the question about the Jedi Order's rule on not being married, because here Obi-Wan and Satine obviously had this love for one another, but yet he is able to control his emotion and not fall to the dark side, not execute on failing those Jedi precepts. So could they have been married and he also still not fallen? I want to think yes.
Yeah.
And that rule of not being married actually hurt the Jedi Order and the Jedi as a whole, rather than teaching them how to carry out on those affections.
Yeah, I wonder how, if, so we see like with Anakin, his children are strong with the Force. If the Jedi had children, I would assume that the majority of them would probably be strong with the Force. And I wonder how you can't have attachment to your children as they grow up in the Jedi Order, and how you would relinquish that, inside their training, because it's that one might be difficult. So maybe that's kind of the reason. I always considered them taking the killed children, like, they recognize it's not necessarily good, but they consider it a necessary evil, because these people that are strong in the Force would end up being more likely than not utilizing the dark side, and then becoming people that would wreak
Yeah.
havoc on their worlds. That's how I've always justified it.
It's more than that. The consequences of the Jedi Order's rule is that they lose force sensitives all the time.
Right.
They leave the Jedi Order, and it weakens the Jedi Order, I think, because
Right.
they could have had these force sensitive and continued to train them, continue to mentor them and guide them and help them learn how to keep from falling to the dark side while embracing these emotional connections they have to both spouses and children.
Right.
And they could have taught them how to be a family without falling to the dark side through those connections. So I think it hurts the Jedi Order overall, but that's that's a discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a real discussion in the real world when it comes to religion.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I don't know. I don't know if we can solve that answer here, but it's definitely an interesting question on whether it could be. I don't know. Do Shinto monks get married or not? I don't know. That's a
I'm
good
not
question.
sure.
I
I'm
think
not
that's
sure.
kind of what they're patterned after.
But the question arises: where for force sensitives that leave the Jedi Order, they've been trained for some number of years
Right.
on, using the Force
Right.
and how to use the Force. When they leave the Jedi Order, do they just stop using the Force? Why?
They
Why
can't.
would they?
They
Like,
really don't.
right? I don't
It seems to me like they're really. The only time that I've seen anybody, the two people that have left the Jedi Order that I know of, is Ahsoka and Count Dooku, and so that's the only ones I'm aware of. I don't have any examples really of anybody kicked out of the Jedi Order that's allowed to leave on their own. So, did I lose you, Santa?
who left the Jedi Order. And there's like 8 of them or something like that. 8, 10, 11, something
I
like
think
that.
it's 21 total over the course of the years that they've. I think 20
Maybe
or
so.
21.
Maybe so. So they've got these statues erected to Jedi Masters who left,
Right.
which is fascinating.
Right. I just don't
And a
know if
lot of
there's
people,
more than that. I don't know the stories behind all those. If there's
right?
more.
Well, and the question is why doesn't Dooku have a statue? Right?
Right.
Well, because he went to the dark side. But what do these others do? Right? So
I don't know. That's a good question. So,
Yeah.
but ultimately, Bo-Katan breaks Obi-Wan out, right?
Yep.
After Maul says he's going to imprison him to languish in his grief. And so basically leave him in torture and self-doubt on whether he could have saved Satine or not. And so ultimately that becomes the question. And what would happen? But Bo-Katan breaks him out, and it's in that moment that we have it revealed that Bo-Katan is Satine's sister, and it hasn't been revealed up to that point explicitly. And when he says, "You're her sister, aren't you?" And that's when, because that's the moment where she says, "Go tell the council, go tell the Senate that Mandalore's been taken over." And to which, he says, "That means you'll be occupied." And she says, "Mandalorians have survived and will continue to survive. Go do it. We can't have an outsider rule Mandalore."
And then Darth Sidious arrives.
Yep, that's simultaneous to this whole thing.
Yep, and he has decided that it's time to nip this thing in the bud. He's been aware of Maul, and Maul out there doing whatever he's doing, but he realizes Maul's raising to power. He's at a critical juncture, and it's time to personally get involved. He doesn't send Dooku to do it. He doesn't send an underling. He goes to take care of this himself.
Right.
And he meets Maul face to face. They're in the Great Hall there on Mandalore, and
his entrance is epic.
It is.
Boom. With all the guards. I thought that was awesome.
It's fantastic. And Maul tries to feign allegiance, like, "Oh, Master, I'm so glad you're here." And Palpatine's having none of it. He's like, "Nope. we're going to take care of this now. I'm going to take care of it. And then,
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. He goes, I am surprised to see you alive.
Yeah, yeah.
He goes, but it looks like you have become a rival. He's like, and that's when it's on.
It's on, and the battle goes in Maul and Savage's favor for a good portion of it, to a point where they have absolutely won the upper hand over Palpatine, and then he ends up killing Savage, lightninging Maul, and then ultimately Palpatine comes back. Savage is dead. He has Maul in his grip and says, "I'm not going to kill you. I have other plans for you." Right. And,
right after Maul begs for mercy, he goes, "Mercy, mercy."
So the question is, because leading up to season 7 that's coming up, we don't see Palpatine's plans for Maul carried out. So through the rest of season 5, all of season 6, we don't see Palpatine using Maul or having any purpose for Maul being alive.
Right.
So this is sort of left unpaid off. So as we talk about season 7 coming up, not only is this 4-part story arc one of the best of the Clone Wars, it's absolutely critical to season 7. You can't have full understanding of what's going on in season 7 without this story arc, without watching it and understanding what's going on. And this story arc isn't paid off yet without season 7. Presumably, we'll see how Palpatine's plans for Maul are carried out
together. And then, of course, we know that season 7 is going to lead to Rebels, but
yeah.
So we have to. This is going to hopefully answer some of the questions of how we get from here to Solo, from Solo to Rebels, and answer some of those questions that's in between it. If you made it this far, it tells me you liked it, and hope you'll follow us over to Santa's channel, the end screen right there, where we'll do the best arc in the Clone Wars, what I call the Wrong Jedi.